Everyone thinks Transformers is simple. Autobots are the heroes. Decepticons are the villains. Optimus Prime fights for freedom. Megatron fights for power. But that version of the story is almost too clean. Because once you go deeper into Transformers lore, the war stops looking like a simple battle between good and evil. It starts looking engineered. The Autobots may have begun as manufactured workers. The Decepticons may have begun as a revolution that was corrupted. The Maximals and Predacons are the descendants of a war that never really ended. The Minicons were created as bait. The Quintessons may have turned Cybertron into a factory, and Unicron, the planet-sized god of destruction, may not want either side to win. He wants the fighting to continue forever. So today, we are breaking down every major Transformers faction. Not just who they are, but what they reveal about the real history of Cybertron. And by the end, Autobots versus Decepticons may feel like the biggest lie in Transformers history. The Autobots are the faction most people think of first when they hear Transformers. They are the heroes, the protectors, the ones standing between innocent worlds and total destruction. Their leader is almost always Optimus Prime, and his entire worldview can be summed up in one legendary belief: freedom is the right of all sentient beings. That line sounds heroic, but once you understand where the Autobots came from, it becomes much more powerful, because in many versions of Transformers lore, the Autobots were not originally built as warriors. They were workers, domestic robots, industrial machines, civilian laborers, consumer products. They were not designed to conquer Cybertron. They were designed to serve it, and that changes everything. The Autobots do not believe in freedom because it sounds noble. They believe in freedom because they know what it means to be controlled. They know what it means to be treated like property. Even their faction symbol has a strange history. In toy design history, the Autobot logo was inspired by the head sculpt of Prowl. But inside the lore, the symbol has also been connected to Cybertron's old consumer robot product line. In other words, what later became a symbol of liberation may have started as a manufacturer's mark, a brand. The Autobots reclaimed it. They took something that once represented ownership and turned it into a symbol of resistance. That is why the Autobots feel different from most sci-fi armies. They do not usually transform into tanks, jets, or weapons of war. They transform into trucks, cars, emergency vehicles, civilian machines. Optimus Prime becomes a truck. Ratchet becomes an ambulance. Bumblebee becomes a small car. Prowl becomes a police vehicle. Their alternate modes are not just disguises. They tell you what the Autobots are meant to be. They are not invaders. They are protectors, hiding among the people they defend. And then there is the matrix of leadership. This is not just a glowing object in Optimus Prime's chest. It ties the Autobots to something much bigger than politics or war. It connects them to Primus, the creator god of Cybertron. That means Optimus Prime is not just a military commander. He is almost a spiritual guardian, carrying the burden of Cybertron's highest ideal, freedom. But to the Decepticons, that ideal looks weak. To them, freedom creates disorder, and that is where the war turns darker. The Decepticons are terrifying, but not only because they are powerful. They are terrifying because, in some versions of the story, they began with a point. Depending on the continuity, the Decepticons have two major origin paths. In older Generation 1 style lore, they descend from Cybertron's military caste, robots built for combat, who eventually turn their strength toward conquest. But in many modern retellings, Megatron begins somewhere much lower. He is not born as a king. He is a miner, a gladiator, a voice for Cybertron's forgotten lower classes. That version of Megatron looked at Cybertron's corrupt society and saw something broken. He saw inequality. He saw control. He saw a system that treated some Cybertronians as disposable. And at first, his cause did not look like evil. It looked like revolution. But that is the tragedy of Megatron. His anger became ideology. His ideology became conquest, and his revolution became a dictatorship. The Decepticon slogan says everything: peace through tyranny, not peace through justice, not peace through freedom, peace through control. The Decepticons believe the universe can be fixed only if the strongest are allowed to rule it. That is why their society is so unstable. They claim to be an army, but they are really a permanent power struggle. If you are strong enough to challenge the leader, you can become the leader. That is why Starscream never stops plotting. That is why Shockwave obeys logic more than loyalty. That is why Galvatron becomes even more unstable than Megatron. That is why Decepticon leadership changes so often across Transformers history. Their entire culture is built on the idea that strength equals legitimacy. But there is a contradiction inside the Decepticons. Megatron began by fighting oppression. Then he became the oppressor. And that makes the Decepticons more interesting than simple villains. They are what happens when a revolution forgets the people it was supposed to save. Their faction symbol reflects that too. The Decepticon insignia is sharp, angular, and aggressive, the opposite of the more rounded Autobot symbol. In toy design lore, it is connected to Soundwave's head sculpt. And that fits perfectly, because Soundwave represents the terrifying side of the Decepticons better than almost anyone. Silence, surveillance, loyalty, control. But the Decepticons are not the end of the war. They are only one generation of it, because centuries later, Cybertron changes. The bodies get smaller, the energy runs lower, and the same ancient conflict comes back wearing animal skin. At first, the Maximals look like a gimmick, transformers that turn into animals. Optimus Primal becomes a gorilla. Cheater becomes a cheetah. Rhinox becomes a rhinoceros. But the Maximals are not just animal-themed Autobots. They are what happens after Cybertron survives long enough to evolve. In Beast Wars, the Maximals are the descendants of the Autobots, living roughly 300 years after the original Generation 1 era. By this point, Cybertron has gone through a major energy crisis. To survive, Cybertronians undergo the Great Upgrade, a civilization-wide shift into smaller, more fuel-efficient bodies. The Autobots become the Maximals, and in theory, this should be the peaceful future. The Maximals inherit the Autobot values: democracy, exploration, cooperation, and respect for life. They are not conquerors. They are scientists, explorers, and protectors. Their ship, the Axelon, is not an invasion vessel. It is an exploration ship, but the old war does not truly end. It only changes size. When the Maximals crash land on prehistoric Earth, the planet's raw energon radiation is too dangerous for their robot forms, so they scan organic animals as alternate modes, and this is where Beast Wars becomes genius. The Maximals' animal forms are not random. They reveal who they are: a gorilla, a rhino, a cheetah. Powerful animals, but not monstrous ones. They feel heroic, grounded, protective. The Maximals are Cybertron's future, trying to escape Cybertron's past. But they cannot escape it, because the descendants of the Decepticons are still out there, and they are not interested in peace. The Predacons are the descendants of the Decepticons in the Beast era. But they are not just Decepticons with animal modes. They are colder, sneakier, more conspiratorial. By the time of Beast Wars, Cybertron is supposedly at peace under the Pax Cybertronia. But that peace is not equal. The Maximals hold political authority, while the Predacons are pushed into a lower, more resentful position. Officially, the war is over. Unofficially, the Predacons have never forgotten. And then comes Beast Wars Megatron. He chooses that name deliberately. He is not the original Megatron, but he wants the weight of that legacy. He wants to be seen as the heir to the Decepticon cause. And just like the Maximals, the Predacons' beast modes reveal their identity. Raptors, spiders, scorpions, wasps, predators, venomous creatures, ambush hunters. The Maximals scan animals that feel powerful and noble. The Predacons scan creatures that feel dangerous, patient, and cruel, and their politics match their bodies. Predacon society is filled with hidden agendas. Tarantulas is always plotting. Pterosaur wants power. Megatron manipulates everyone around him. Even when they work together, they are never truly united. They are the Decepticon ideology after centuries of bitterness. Not an open empire, a conspiracy waiting for its moment. But here is the thing. Neither the Autobots nor the Decepticons were truly the beginning. Neither were the Maximals or Predacons, because before all of them, There were the ones who treated Cybertronian life as a product. The Quintessons may be the darkest faction in Transformers lore, not because they are the strongest, because they make the entire war feel manufactured. In classic Generation 1 lore, the Quintessons were the original creators of Cybertronian life, but they did not create the Transformers out of love. They created them as merchandise. Cybertron was not originally a homeworld. It was a factory, and the Transformers were products. There were two major product lines: consumer robots, military hardware. Those two lines eventually became the Autobots and the Decepticons. So in this version of the story, the greatest civil war in Cybertronian history may have started as a corporate supply chain. That is one of the most disturbing ideas in all of Transformers, because it means the Autobots and Decepticons were not born as nations. They were born as inventory. The Transformers eventually gained sentience and rebelled. One of the key figures in that uprising was A3, who would later be revealed as Alpha Trion. The rebellion drove the Quintessons off Cybertron, but they never really disappeared. They return across Transformers stories as judges, manipulators, schemers, and parasites. They are not brave warriors. They are not idealists. They are the kind of villains who believe everything alive can still be owned. Their design says it all. The Quintessons are famous for their 5 rotating faces: death, wrath, hunger, war, and wisdom, and their trials are basically theater. The verdict is almost always guilty. The sentence is almost always death. That makes the Quintessons terrifying in a completely different way from the Decepticons. Megatron wants to rule Cybertron. The Quintessons believe they already owned it. And if the Quintessons prove that the war began with ownership, the next faction proves something even worse. Someone learned how to weaponize the war itself. Minicons look harmless. They are tiny compared to standard Transformers. But in Transformers Armada, they become one of the most important factions in the entire war, because Minicons have one ability that changes everything: power linking. When a Minicon attaches to a larger Transformer, it can massively increase that Transformer's strength, speed, weapons, or abilities. That instantly makes them valuable. To the Autobots, the Minicons are living beings who deserve protection. To the Decepticons, they are weapons to be collected. And that creates the central conflict of Armada. Both sides race to find them. Both sides fight over them. Both sides become more powerful because of them. But then comes the horrifying twist. The Minicons were not simply lost. They were scattered. In the Armada cartoon, the Minicons were created by Unicron and spread across space so the Autobots and Decepticons would fight over them. Every battle made the war worse, and every battle fed Unicron. That means the Minicons were not just victims of the conflict. They were bait. Their existence proves that something above the Autobots and Decepticons was manipulating both sides. The Decepticons thought they were gaining weapons. The Autobots thought they were saving innocence. But Unicron was feeding on the chaos the entire time. That is what makes the Minicons so tragic. They are one of the smallest factions in Transformers. But their role exposes one of the biggest truths. The war is not just being fought. It is being harvested. And before we reach the god who feeds on it, we need to look at the strangest faction in the entire franchise. The ones who survived by becoming living junk. The Junkions are exactly what they sound like. They live on a planet made of garbage. Their world is a massive wasteland of scrap metal, broken machinery, old technology, and discarded parts. But the Junkions do not just live in junk. They are built from it. They can repair themselves using debris from the world around them. Their bodies look like they were assembled from whatever was nearby. They are messy, strange, chaotic, and somehow unforgettable. The Junkions first appear in the 1986 animated film, where they seem hostile at first before suddenly becoming allies. That shift feels random until you understand how Junkion society works. They are not driven by Autobot morality or Decepticon conquest. They are driven by survival, salvage, and culture, and their culture comes from one of the weirdest sources imaginable: Earth television. The Junkions picked up broadcasts from across space and built their language around them. Their leader, Wreck-Gar, speaks almost entirely in TV commercials, slogans, catchphrases, and media fragments. Imagine an entire civilization raised on junk mail, reruns, advertisements, action shows, and broken signals. That is the Junkions. They are one of the only factions that feel truly outside the Cybertronian war. They are not trying to rule the universe. They are not trying to fulfill an ancient prophecy. They are not trying to resurrect a god. They are not trying to restore Cybertron. They are just trying to survive in the wreckage. And in a universe full of tyrants and chosen heroes, that makes them weirdly honest. The Junkions are what is left after every empire throws its trash away. But some factions are not trying to survive the apocalypse. Some are trying to cause it. Unicron is not just a villain. He is a cosmic force, a planet-sized destroyer, the Chaos Bringer, the opposite of Primus. And when Unicron acts, he rarely acts alone. He creates servants. He corrupts warriors. He rebuilds the broken into weapons. These are his heralds. The most famous example is Megatron. In the 1986 Transformers film, Megatron is dying, broken, drifting through space. Then Unicron finds him, and instead of letting him die, Unicron transforms him into Galvatron. But this is not just an upgrade. It is a violation. Megatron gains power, but he loses part of himself. He becomes tied to something far larger and far darker than the Decepticon cause. Unicron also creates Cyclonus, Scourge, and the Sweeps, turning former Decepticons into cosmic enforcers. In Rise of the Beasts, the Terracons fill a similar role. Led by Scourge, they serve Unicron by preparing worlds for consumption, and Scourge has one detail that tells you everything about him. He collects faction insignias from the Transformers he has defeated. That is not just trophy taking. That is identity theft. He is not simply killing enemies. He is collecting the symbols of entire causes: Autobot, Decepticon, Maximal, maybe others. To Scourge, factions are not beliefs. They are trophies. The Heralds of Unicron are not a normal army. They are an extinction process. Their purpose is not to conquer planets. Their purpose is to weaken them, to break resistance, to prepare the feast. And that is what makes Unicron different from Megatron. Megatron wants victory. Unicron wants consumption. Megatron wants to rule what remains. Unicron wants nothing to remain at all. But there is one power ancient enough to stand opposite him, the creator behind Cybertron itself. Primus is the creator god of Cybertronian life. In many versions of Transformers lore, he did not simply create Cybertron. He became Cybertron. His body formed the planet. His spark gave life to the Transformers. His will shaped the origin of their civilization. If Unicron is chaos and consumption, Primus is creation and order. And from Primus came the 13 Primes, the first Transformers. They are not a normal faction. They do not operate like the Autobots or Decepticons. They are closer to a founding pantheon. Vector Prime is connected to time and space. Alpha Trion becomes the keeper of history. Megatronus betrays the others and becomes the fallen. And that betrayal matters more than almost anything. Because Megatronus becomes a mythic shadow over Cybertronian history, a prime who fell, a founder who betrayed the others, a symbol of power corrupted. That legacy echoes directly into the Decepticon movement. So the war between Autobots and Decepticons is not only political, it is mythological. The Autobots inherit the dream of freedom. The Decepticons inherit the hunger for domination. The Maximals and Predacons inherit the war in a smaller form. The Heralds of Unicron inherit cosmic destruction. And every Cybertronian faction lives in the shadow of choices made by beings almost too ancient to understand. That is what makes Transformers lore so much bigger than it first appears. It is not just robots fighting over territory. It is a civilization trying to understand whether it was created for freedom, control, or destruction. But there is one more faction type that changes everything, because Cybertronians are not the only ones choosing sides. When the war reaches Earth, humans become a faction too. In the live-action Transformers films, Humans are not just background characters. They become factions in their own right, and sometimes they are almost as dangerous as the Cybertronians. Sector 7 treats Transformers like specimens. Nest works alongside the Autobots in an uneasy military alliance. Cemetery Wind hunts Autobots and Decepticons with almost no distinction between them. The TRF treats every Cybertronian as an existential threat, and suddenly, the war is no longer two-sided. It becomes a three-way conflict. Autobots are not just fighting Decepticons. They are also trying to survive human fear, military paranoia, secret agencies, political betrayal, black ops programs, alien technology experiments. And honestly, from Earth's perspective, the fear makes sense. Giant alien robots keep arriving on the planet, hiding inside vehicles, fighting in cities, destroying landmarks, and bringing ancient cosmic enemies with them. Humans may not understand the full history of Cybertron, but they understand danger. That makes the human factions complicated. They are not always right. Sometimes they are cruel. Sometimes they are corrupt. Sometimes they become exactly what the Autobots are fighting against. But their fear is believable, and that is what makes them important. They prove that once the Cybertronian war spreads, it infects every world it touches. Earth does not just become a battlefield. Earth becomes a participant. And that brings the entire story together. So when people say Transformers is just Autobots versus Decepticons, they are missing the real story. This is not one war. It is a chain reaction. The Quintessons create life as a product. The Autobots rise from servitude. The Decepticons turn revolution into tyranny. The Maximals and Predacons inherit the conflict centuries later. The Minicons are used as bait by a cosmic destroyer. The Junkions survive in the wreckage everyone else leaves behind. The Heralds of Unicron turn war into food. The 13 Primes turn politics into mythology, and humans turn Earth into a third battlefield. The real tragedy of Transformers is not simply that Autobots and Decepticons are fighting, it is that almost every faction was shaped by someone else's control. Factories, gods, tyrants, governments, ancient betrayals, cosmic hunger. Cybertron's history is not just a war story. It is the story of every generation trying to escape the machine that built them. And that is why Optimus Prime's belief still matters. Freedom is not just the Autobots slogan. It is the one idea every villain in Transformers is trying to destroy. Because if the war was engineered, then freedom is the only thing that can break it. Which Transformers faction do you think is the most dangerous? The Decepticons, because they turned revolution into tyranny? The Quintessons, because they may have created the entire system? Or Unicron's Heralds, because they do not want to win the war, they want to feed on it? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more Transformers lore explained, watch this next.